Hey guys, tonight we're going to step into a world that is, frankly, completely unforgiving. We're going to walk the grimy streets of Victorian London, a place where the air itself tastes of coal and the fog clings to everything, including your very soul. It's a city teeming with life, and also with a silent, suffocating kind of dread that we'll get to know very intimately. In this journey, you won't be a wealthy aristocrat in a fancy carriage or a clever detective solving a mystery. Oh no. You're going to be something far more common, far more essential, and if we're being honest, something you probably won't survive for very long. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know your location and the local time down in the comments. I love to see just how far this little corner of the internet reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The journey begins not with a choice, but with a birth. You open your eyes to a world of damp, cold air and the smell of old smoke. This isn't a nursery filled with lullabies. It's a cramped cellar in a London slum, a place where the only light is a sliver from a high window choked by grime. You don't have a name yet, not one that matters anyway. Your name will be Sweep, Climbing Boy, or Little One, if you're lucky. Your existence is defined by the sooty pall that hangs over the entire city, a constant reminder of the unseen, unceasing work that fuels London's industrial heart. Your small body, your slender limbs, they aren't for play or growth. They are, from your very first breaths, a resource, a tool. You are born into soot, and from soot, you will not escape easily. The first 6 or 7 years are a blur of hunger and cold, a prelude to your destiny. Your parents, if they are still present, can't feed another mouth. They look at you, and they don't see a child to be cherished. They see a mouth that needs to be fed and a burden they cannot carry. So one day, a man arrives. He is the master sweep. His face is a canvas of black lines and wrinkles. His clothes are permanently stained with the dust of his trade. He smells of ash and creosote, a scent that will become the most familiar thing in your life. He offers your parents a pittance, maybe a shilling, maybe a half-crown, and in return, he takes you. It's a simple transaction, a desperate exchange of a child for a few meager coins and the promise of some food and a place to sleep. You don't understand it, not at first. You just feel the cold grip of his hand as he leads you away from the only family you've ever known and into the murky unknown of his workshop. The master sweep's home is a harsh school. You're not an apprentice learning a noble craft. You are a piece of living equipment. The older boys, hardened by the work, view you with a mix of pity and contempt. You are small, soft, and new. They see you as you are, fresh meat for the brutal, unforgiving flues of London's chimneys. Your first few lessons are simple. You must learn to carry heavy bags of soot. You must learn to listen for the master's gruff commands. And most importantly, you must learn to climb. The first chimney is the worst. You stand before it, a yawning black hole that smells of death and decay. The master sweep orders you in. You hesitate, your small hands and feet reluctant to touch the rough, sooty brick. Then he gives you the first of many shoves, and you begin your ascent. You are taught to brace your knees and elbows against the sides of the chimney, inching your way up. The soot is thick and suffocating. It fills your lungs, stings your eyes, and coats your tongue with a bitter, acrid taste. It's not just dirt. It's a living, breathing thing that wants to choke the life out of you. This is where the true horror begins. The soot is not just dust, it's toxic. It's full of carcinogens and chemical residue from 1,000 fires. Your skin, already scraped raw from the brick, begins to develop lesions and sores. You're in constant pain. Your lungs burn with every breath. The sheer physical agony of the work is relentless. A mainstream historical fact from this period is that many of these climbing boys were as young as 4 years old, a detail that seems impossible to fathom today. The narrowness of the flues in the grand Georgian and Victorian homes was such that only the smallest children could fit. And the earlier you started, the better. And what happens if you get stuck? The master sweep won't climb after you. Instead, he might light a fire at the bottom of the chimney, hoping the smoke and heat will scare you into a frenzy of climbing, or he might send up a bundle of straw to light for the same effect. Or, if he's feeling particularly cruel, he might use a more direct method. A quirky, truly disturbing tidbit from this era is the use of sharp pins or even needles to prick the feet or legs of a boy who had paused or gotten stuck. This was called pricking, and the resulting pain would, in theory, compel the child to keep moving. It's a brutal reality that underscores the expendable nature of these young lives. Historians still argue whether these climbing boys were considered more like apprentices bound by a legal contract or simply cheap, replaceable property to their masters, with little to no concern for their health or well-being. Your days become a blur of chimneys, a never-ending cycle of climbing, scraping, and coughing. The world outside the flue, with its grand houses and bustling streets, is a distant dream. Your world is black and suffocating, a vertical prison from which there is no escape. The only relief is a brief, restless sleep, dreaming of a clean face, a full stomach, and a world where the sky isn't a permanent shade of gray. You're a small cog in a massive machine, a necessary evil that no one wants to look at too closely, and a silent victim of an age that valued profit over people. The master sweep isn't just a boss. He's your owner. You were sold, remember? And that act of selling means he holds absolute power over you, far beyond what any reasonable person today could imagine. Your days begin before dawn, often as early as 3 or 4 in the morning. You're roused from a fitful sleep on a pile of rags, or perhaps even on the cold floor of the workshop, your stomach aching with persistent hunger. There's no hot breakfast waiting for you, no comforting words, just a kick or a shout, a reminder that another day of toil has begun. The cold, damp air of London bites at your skin as you stumble out, rubbing the last vestiges of sleep and the ever-present soot from your eyes. You walk through the still dark streets, your bare feet or thin, worn shoes slapping against the cobblestones. The only sounds are your master's heavy boots, the distant creak of a cart, and the occasional cough that racks your small frame. Your hands, perpetually chapped and raw, clutch a sooty bag filled with the tools of your trade, brushes, scrapers, and a rope. You carry it all, even though the bag often feels heavier than you are. You're already tired, and the day hasn't truly begun. Your first job might be at a grand Mayfair townhouse, its elegant facade a stark contrast to your own grimy appearance. You stand there, a small dark shadow against the pale dawn, while the inhabitants of the house sleep soundly in their warm beds. The master sweep knocks, and after a moment, a servant opens the door, often with a look of disdain. To them, you are merely a necessary nuisance, a part of the city's dirt that must be dealt with. You slip inside, a ghost of grime, heading straight for the hearth. The chimney is a monster. It looms over you, a black maw leading up into the unknown. The master gives his instructions, a gruff bark that brooks no argument. You strip down to a thin, flimsy shirt, or sometimes nothing at all, to make it easier to squeeze through the narrow flue. The first entry is always the hardest. You push your head into the darkness, followed by your shoulders, then your torso. The brick is rough against your skin, scraping and tearing as you twist and contort your body. It's a claustrophobic hell, made worse by the layers of compacted soot that line the flue, ready to cascade down on you at the slightest disturbance. As you climb, you use your elbows and knees, scrabbling upwards, dislodging chunks of soot, cobwebs, and sometimes even dead birds. The dust is blinding, filling your mouth and nostrils, making it impossible to breathe without gagging. You can hear your own ragged breaths, amplified by the confines of the chimney, turning into desperate gasps. The soot fills your lungs, and you cough, a deep rasping sound that feels like it's tearing your chest apart. This isn't just dirt. It's a constant, insidious poison entering your body with every inhale. One of the most persistent, cruel practices was known as brushing. If you hesitated or couldn't reach a particularly tight spot, the master might use a long brush, similar to a toilet brush, with stiff bristles, and force it up from below, literally pushing you upwards from your feet. This wasn't to help you. It was to ensure you kept moving, regardless of the pain. It's a terrifying thought, being in that dark, confined space, knowing that if you stop, something sharp and bristly will prod you from below. This fear, this constant threat of pain, was a primary motivator. The sheer volume of chimneys in London alone was staggering. By the mid-19th century, with the rapid growth of the city and its increasing reliance on coal for heating and industry, thousands upon thousands of chimneys needed cleaning regularly. This demand meant a constant need for climbing boys, perpetuating a system that was both barbaric and economically convenient for property owners. The very air you breathe outside of the chimney is thick with the smoke and fog from these thousands of fires. It's known as a pea-souper fog, so dense that you can barely see your hand in front of your face, adding another layer of grimness to your daily existence. After what feels like an eternity, you reach the top of the chimney. For a fleeting moment, you see the sky, a patch of gray, or sometimes, miraculously, a glimpse of sun. You push the remaining soot down, then begin your descent, a slightly easier but no less painful journey back into the darkness. When you finally emerge from the hearth, you are a creature transformed. Your face is a mask of black, your skin is streaked with sweat and tears, and your hair is matted with grime. Your small, fragile body aches in every joint, and the lingering taste of soot makes you want to retch. This isn't the end of your day. You might have several more chimneys to clean, each one a new challenge, a new pain. There's no rest, no hot food, often not even clean water. Your meals are meager, just enough to keep you from starving. You often eat with soot-stained hands, the blackness never truly leaving your skin. Even after washing, the dirt seems to be permanently embedded under your fingernails, in the creases of your skin, a constant reminder of what you are. Historians still argue whether the climbing boys truly understood the long-term health implications of their work, or if they were simply too preoccupied with day-to-day survival to consider the future. For you, the future is just another chimney. The master sweep, meanwhile, counts his money, the coins jingling in his pocket. He might be harsh, but he's also a product of his time, operating within a system that values cheap labor above all else. He sees his boys as investments, albeit ones that are frequently sickly and often short-lived. This constant cycle of work, pain, and deprivation shapes your entire being. Childhood is not a time of innocence or play. It's a grim apprenticeship in suffering. The only toys you know are the brushes you wield. The only games you play are the dangerous dances with death inside a sooty flue. The brutal rhythm of your days continues, a monotonous, relentless cycle that wears down not just your body, but your spirit. You trudge from one house to another, a small, dark figure in a city full of bustling life. The streets are a blur of horse-drawn carriages, hurried pedestrians, and the constant din of commerce. But you don't really see it. Your world is small, confined to the hearths you enter and the flues you climb. You are a ghost, moving through the city unnoticed, except for the occasional scowl from a well-dressed woman who sees your filthy state and pulls her child closer. You are a reminder of the ugly side of progress, the necessary but unpleasant work that keeps the city warm. The fog, that notorious London smog, is a constant companion. It's not the gentle romantic mist of a storybook. It's a thick, acrid soup of coal smoke, industrial fumes, and moisture. It clings to your skin, seeps into your clothing, and makes every breath a struggle. On the worst days, a pea souper is so dense you can barely see your master standing right in front of you. This isn't just an inconvenience. It's a part of the daily terror. Imagine climbing in a chimney, already dark and suffocating, and then having that thick, toxic fog seep in from the top, making it impossible to see or breathe. It's a layer of psychological torment on top of the physical pain. Your life is a constant battle against physical ailments. The soot isn't just a nuisance, it's a killer. It gets into every cut, every scrape, and every open sore on your body. You suffer from a specific, grim malady known as chimney sweep's cancer, or soot wart. This is a form of scrotal cancer, a direct result of the toxic particles of soot lodging in your skin folds. While you're too young to understand the terminal nature of this disease, you do know the persistent, burning pain it causes. The doctors of the era, limited as their knowledge was, even documented this specific illness, a grim testament to the horrors of your trade. The constant coughing is another ever-present symptom. Your lungs are slowly being destroyed, filled with an accumulation of dust and tar. You might not live to be old, and you know it in your bones, even if you can't put a name to the feeling. Your meals are a pittance, often just a crust of dry bread and a little water. You are always hungry, a low, gnawing sensation in your stomach that never truly goes away. Sometimes, if you're lucky, the master sweep might give you a small piece of cheese or a bit of boiled potato. But these are rare treats. The hunger makes you weak, makes the climbs more dangerous. But it also means you're smaller, more desirable for the job. It's a vicious cycle of malnourishment. The master sweep has no incentive to feed you well. A well-fed child might grow too quickly and become useless for the narrowest chimneys. After a long day of work, you return to the workshop. There's no fire to warm you, no bath to clean the day's grime. You sleep huddled with the other boys, a small heap of shivering, coughing bodies. The soot-stained rags you wear offer little comfort against the cold. Your body aches, your hands throb, and your mind is filled with the endless black of the chimneys. This is not a life of rest and recovery. It's a life of constant deterioration. You are a disposable resource, a temporary solution to a persistent problem, and your body is slowly, inexorably, paying the price. Historians still argue whether the general public truly understood the full extent of the horrors the climbing boys endured. Many simply saw a sooty child on the street and either felt pity or revulsion, but few truly grasped the day-to-day brutality. A quirky detail that highlights this disconnect is the belief among some people that chimney sweeps brought good luck. In some areas, it was considered a good omen to see a sweep on your wedding day. You, a small, miserable child, were a symbol of good fortune for others, a stark and ironic contrast to your own existence. It's a strange contradiction, to be both a pariah and a symbol of hope, that you couldn't possibly comprehend. The world you inhabit is a paradox. You clean the chimneys of the grandest houses, filled with beautiful paintings, fine furniture, and the smell of roasting meat. You pass through these places, a silent, sooty shadow, seeing a life that is utterly alien to your own. You see a child your age, warm and well-fed, playing with a wooden soldier or a doll, and for a moment, you feel a sharp pang of something you can't name. It's a glimpse into a parallel existence, a life you were denied from birth. But the moment passes. The master sweep is calling, the next chimney is waiting, and your world shrinks back down to the size of a dark flue. The only thing you can do is keep moving, keep climbing, and hope that you don't get stuck, because getting stuck means an even more painful end. The world shrinks to the size of a chimney. This is a cold, hard truth that you learn with every aching muscle and every scraped knuckle. Your days blend into one another, a monotonous march from one sooty flue to the next. The constant physical pain is a fact of life, but it's the less obvious toll that truly erodes you. Your senses are dulled by the perpetual grime. The smell of fresh bread is alien, replaced by the acrid scent of burnt tar. The vibrant colors of a street vendor's fruit cart are just a blur of faded hues because your eyes are constantly irritated by dust and smoke. The sound of a child's laughter is a ghost, a sound you barely remember, drowned out by the rasping coughs of the other boys and the gruff commands of your master. Your body begins to bear the marks of your profession permanently. The constant scraping and pressure of climbing leave your knees and elbows scarred and swollen, a condition known as chimney sweep's knee or soot wart on the limbs. Your back is often hunched from sleeping on hard floors and contorting yourself into narrow spaces. Your teeth are stained black. Your gums are often bleeding, and your skin is a patchwork of black and gray, no matter how much you try to wash. Even after the rare, precious moment with a bucket of cold water, the soot seems to have permanently embedded itself into your pores. The damage is a kind of irreversible tattoo, a constant reminder of the life you lead. But the physical deformities are only half the story. The psychological burden is immense. You are a child, but you are not allowed to be childish. There is no time for games, for imagination, for the simple, joyful curiosity that defines youth. Instead, you are taught a brutal kind of pragmatism. You learn to recognize which chimneys are the most dangerous, which ones are likely to have a fire still smoldering, and which ones have a flue so narrow you might get stuck. Your fear is a weapon, a motivator that keeps you alert and alive. You learn to live with a low hum of anxiety, a constant dread of the next climb, the next potential disaster. And disaster does strike. It's a well-known fact of the era that many climbing boys died on the job. Some suffocated, trapped in a flue so narrow they couldn't move. Others fell from the rooftops, a fatal plunge onto the unforgiving cobblestones below. Some were burned alive, sent into a chimney that was still too hot, the master sweep too eager to get the job done. The soot itself was a constant threat. A sudden cascade of compacted soot could knock a boy unconscious, and the ensuing inhalation would lead to a slow, silent death. The sheer casualness of these tragedies is perhaps the most horrifying part. A boy would die, and a new one would be found. The system simply moved on, a relentless machine with a constant grim appetite for young lives. One of the most peculiar and grim stories from this period involves the strange objects found inside chimneys. The soot wasn't the only thing you had to deal with. Sometimes you'd find old toys, lost jewelry, or even the skeletons of small animals trapped in the flues. A particularly quirky detail is that one boy, on his first climb, found a stash of forgotten coins in a hidden compartment, and for a brief, beautiful moment, he was rich. But the money was quickly confiscated by his master, a stark reminder that nothing you find is truly yours. The world you inhabit is a world of loss, not discovery. Historians still argue whether the masters who treated their boys so cruelly were themselves just products of a harsh society, or if there was a deeper, more profound malevolence at play. The reality is likely a mix of both. They were men operating in a world that saw children as a cheap, disposable workforce, and they were simply capitalizing on a cruel system. But that doesn't excuse the individual acts of brutality, the kicks, the shoves, the pins. It's a debate with no easy answers, a moral gray area that you, a child covered in soot, have no time to contemplate. Your world is black and white, a simple equation of pain and survival. Your one true respite, the only moment of genuine freedom you have, is during the brief walks between jobs. You walk through the city, and for a few moments, you are just another small figure on the street. You might pass a park and see other children playing, chasing a wooden hoop or skipping rope. You stop for a moment, a small, dark shadow on the periphery, watching this alien world of joy and innocence. But the master sweep's voice breaks the spell, a sharp command to move on. You are not a child of play. You are a child of labor, and your brief, stolen moments of peace are always fleeting. The next chimney awaits. Childhood. The word itself feels like a foreign concept, something you've only heard about in hushed tones or seen through the grime-streaked window of a wealthy home. Your childhood isn't a time of innocence or play. It's a brutal, compressed apprenticeship in suffering. The fleeting moments of joy that other children take for granted, a warm bed, a full stomach, the simple pleasure of running without a purpose, are completely absent from your life. The brief, stolen moments you have to yourself are spent not in play, but in a state of exhaustion, your mind a blank slate of fatigue. The closest you come to a game is the terrifying one you play inside the chimney. It's a game of inches, a calculation of risk and reward. You learn to read the flue, to feel for loose bricks with your raw fingertips, to sense the shifts in the soot that could indicate a dangerous, unstable patch. You develop a kind of sixth sense, a grim intuition that keeps you alive. You learn to move with a precise, almost animalistic grace, your small body a perfect tool for a terrible task. But this isn't a game for fun. It's a game for survival, where the stakes are your very life. Your social circle is as small and bleak as your world. It consists of the other climbing boys, a small band of brothers in filth and misery. You share a language of coughs and quiet groans, a mutual understanding born from shared pain. You learn to trust each other in a way that is unique to your situation. If a boy gets stuck, you try to help, but there's a limit to what you can do. The master sweep's word is law, and his cruelty can't be defied. The brotherhood is a fragile thing, constantly tested by competition for scraps of food and the master's fleeting, capricious moods. It's a community of the damned, bound not by choice, but by a shared, terrible fate. This camaraderie, however, is often overshadowed by the sheer, unyielding loneliness. You are isolated from the world of clean people. The masters of the houses you visit see you as an extension of the dirt you remove. The servants are often kinder, but they too maintain a social distance. You are a pariah, a ghost, a thing to be tolerated and then forgotten. You have no one to talk to about your dreams, your fears, or the constant gnawing hunger in your stomach. Your only confidant is the suffocating darkness of the chimney, and it offers no comfort, only the promise of more pain. A mainstream historical fact that highlights this isolation is the sheer number of children involved. By some estimates, in the early 19th century, there were thousands of climbing boys in London alone, and tens of thousands across Great Britain. This was not a rare tragedy. It was a systemic problem, an integral part of the nation's infrastructure. These children were, in a sense, invisible in plain sight. A massive workforce that was deliberately ignored and forgotten by a society that preferred not to look too closely at the ugly underbelly of its comfort and prosperity. A quirky detail that reveals a small crack in this grim reality is the legend of the sweep's holiday. Once a year, on May 1st, chimney sweeps would hold a celebration. They would dress up in colorful clothes, with garlands and ribbons, and parade through the streets, sometimes accompanied by a Jack in the Green, a figure covered in a wooden frame decorated with leaves and flowers. This was a brief, joyous moment of reclaiming their humanity, a day where they were seen not as objects of disgust, but as participants in a festive tradition. For you, it's a single day of freedom in a sea of misery, a fleeting glimpse of what a normal life might feel like. Historians still argue whether these celebrations were a genuine expression of community and defiance, or a carefully curated spectacle meant to present a more palatable image of the trade to the public. For you, it doesn't matter. It's one day of sunshine in a world of soot, a precious memory to hold on to during the long, dark days. But the parade ends. The garlands are put away. The colorful clothes are replaced by rags, and the master sweep's voice returns, a gruff reminder that the world of chimneys is waiting. You are still a child of soot, and the brief taste of freedom only makes the reality of your life that much harder to bear. The cycle continues, and your spirit, like your body, grows more and more worn down with each passing day. Your existence is a stark testament to the rigid social strata of Victorian London. You are, quite literally, at the bottom of the heap. Society is a towering edifice, built on layers of wealth, influence, and inherited privilege. At the very peak are the aristocrats, the landed gentry, their lives cushioned by generations of accumulated riches. Below them, the burgeoning middle class, merchants, factory owners, professionals, strives to emulate their betters, building grand homes and filling them with the symbols of their newfound prosperity. And beneath them, far, far below, is the vast, churning mass of the working poor. You, a climbing boy, are not just among them. You are at their very lowest rung, a forgotten, disposable shadow. You see glimpses of these higher echelons every day. As you trudge through the wealthier districts, you pass ladies in rustling silks and gentlemen in fine top hats. Their carriages clatter past, splashing mud onto your already grimy clothes. They avert their gaze, or perhaps offer a fleeting look of pity mixed with disgust. To them, you are almost invisible, a necessary part of the urban landscape, like the lamplighters or the night soil men, performing essential but utterly distasteful work that allows their comfortable lives to continue uninterrupted. You exist to serve their needs, to ensure their hearths are warm and their homes free of the dangerous buildup of soot. Yet you are utterly outside their world, a creature of the gutter and the flue. The contrast is brutal. You enter their opulent homes, filled with the scent of roasted meats, polished wood, and expensive perfumes. You see rooms crammed with velvet furniture, gleaming silver, and intricate porcelain. Children, your age, with clean faces and soft clothes, play with expensive toys, read books by a warm fire, and know nothing of hunger or cold. For a moment, you pause, a small black ghost in a world of light and luxury, before the master's sharp command pulls you back to your grim reality. You are a fleeting interruption, a necessary evil, quickly ushered in and out before you can contaminate the pristine environment with your filth. Your master, while perhaps only a step above you in the social hierarchy, still wields immense power. He is, to you, an absolute ruler. He negotiates with the wealthy homeowners, takes their money, and then provides you with the bare minimum to survive. He might wear slightly better clothes, have a roof over his head, and certainly eats more regularly than you do. But even he is viewed with a degree of disdain by the higher classes. He is a tradesman, a man who gets his hands dirty, and thus he occupies a lower status than, say, a doctor or a lawyer. This means that the entire chain of command, from the top of society down to you, is defined by who cleans up whose dirt, literally and metaphorically. This rigid class system meant that the plight of children like you was often ignored. Those with the power to make changes lived in a world utterly detached from your reality. They relied on your labor, yet they rarely saw your faces, or if they did, they quickly looked away. The suffering was out of sight, and therefore largely out of mind. Historians still argue whether the widespread ignorance of the climbing boy's suffering was due to genuine unawareness, or a deliberate, willful blindness on the part of Victorian society. It's a question that delves into the uncomfortable truths of an era lauded for its progress and piety. A quirky anecdote highlighting this societal disconnect is the common practice of sweeping chimneys during the summer months when fires were not lit. This was partly for efficiency, but also, cynically, because the homeowners wanted the dirty, unpleasant work done when they were away on holiday, ensuring their grand residences remained pristine upon their return. So, even your brief respite from the constant fires of winter was still dictated by the convenience of your social betters, rather than any consideration for your well-being. The social pressure to conform, to maintain appearances, and to uphold strict class boundaries was immense. The upper and middle classes wanted their homes immaculate, and the cheapest way to achieve this was through child labor. To question the system too deeply was to question their own comfort, their own privilege. So, you remained an invisible necessity, a silent testament to the hypocrisy that often simmered beneath the surface of Victorian respectability. Your value was tied directly to your ability to fit into spaces no adult could, to perform a task so dirty that no one else would touch it. And because you were so small, so young, so easily replaced, you had no voice, no power, and no recourse. Your future, if you had one, was entirely dependent on the whims of a society that barely acknowledged your existence. To understand why you, a small, grimy child, are an indispensable part of Victorian society. We have to look back in time, far beyond your brief and painful existence. We have to go back to a catastrophe that, in a bizarre twist of fate, laid the foundation for your miserable trade. We have to go back to September of 1666 and the event known as the Great Fire of London. This was a fire so massive, so destructive, that it completely reshaped the city, and in doing so, it created the very problem that you are now paid to solve with your blood and sweat. Before the Great Fire, London's buildings were mostly made of wood and straw, packed together in a dense, chaotic maze of narrow streets. Chimneys, if they existed at all, were often simple holes in the roof or flimsy structures. The fire changed all of that. It raged for 4 days, destroying tens of thousands of homes and leaving most of the city's population homeless. The rebuilding of London was a monumental task, and the new city was designed with fire safety as a paramount concern. New building codes were established. Instead of wood, buildings were now made of brick and stone. And, crucially, proper brick-built chimneys were made mandatory in every home. These chimneys were not just simple vents. They were complex flues, often with bends and turns, designed to carry smoke away from the fire and out of the house efficiently. This new, fire-safe city had a problem. All of these thousands of new chimneys, with their intricate winding flues, were prone to a dangerous buildup of soot and creosote. If not cleaned regularly, this buildup could catch fire, causing another devastating blaze. The old methods of cleaning, using long brushes or simple rods, were no longer effective for these complex, narrow passages. A new solution was needed, and a new profession was born. A profession that required someone small, nimble, and most importantly, cheap. Someone exactly like you. And so the era of the climbing boy began. Your body is a direct consequence of a city's need for safety and a society's desire for convenience. You are a living tool, perfectly adapted to the narrow flues that were designed to protect London from another inferno. The city you walk through today, with its grand brick-built homes and its endless forest of chimneys, is a monument to the very event that created your profession. You are a walking, coughing reminder of the rebuilding of London, a grim legacy of progress. A scholarly debate in this field is whether the architects and builders of the post-fire city foresaw the need for child labor, or if the use of climbing boys was a grim, unforeseen consequence of their new, fire-safe designs. It's a question of intentional cruelty versus tragic oversight, and it gets to the heart of the moral compromises made in the name of urban development. Did they design the flues to be too small for adults on purpose, knowing that children would be the only ones who could clean them? Or did the system of child labor simply fill a gap that emerged later? It's a debate that highlights the complex and often uncomfortable relationship between engineering, economics, and human suffering. A quirky detail about this time is that the chimney was not just a place for soot. It was also a repository of history. As you climb, you might dislodge old pieces of paper, forgotten letters, or even small personal trinkets that fell down the flue years ago. These artifacts, found by modern archaeologists, offer a unique glimpse into the everyday lives of the people who inhabited these homes. For you, of course, a forgotten letter is just another piece of debris to be cleared, a momentary puzzle in the suffocating darkness. You have no time for history. You are too busy living through it. Your master, as he leads you through the city, might boast about the history of the trade. He might tell you that a clean chimney is an act of civic duty, a way to prevent another great tragedy. He might even believe it. But for you, it is simply pain. The grand history of London's rebuilding, the triumph over disaster, is just the reason for your broken body and your soot-filled lungs. You are the hidden cost of a safer city, the invisible price of a warm hearth. The fire of 1666 created the need, and the society of the 19th century created the solution. A solution that happens to be you. You are a walking, breathing relic of a disaster that happened long before you were born. Amidst the constant grime and danger, whispers of change begin to filter down to your level. You don't hear them from a newspaper, which you can't read anyway, but through the master sweep's grumbling and the occasional sympathetic word from a servant. These whispers are of laws, of regulations, of people in high places beginning to talk about the plight of children like you. The very first of these legislative battles, a feeble and ultimately ineffective one, marks the beginning of a long and painful journey toward reform. It's a moment in history when the public conscience, slow and reluctant as it is, finally starts to stir. The first significant attempt to help climbing boys came with the 1840 Chimney Sweepers and Chimneys Regulation Act. On paper, it was a breakthrough. The law stated that no one under the age of 10 could be an apprentice sweep, and that no person under the age of 21 could be sent up a chimney. It also required that any master sweep who took on an apprentice had to have them properly registered with the local parish. This was meant to be a way to track the children and ensure they were not being abused. The goal was noble: to stop the practice of using tiny children to clean chimneys and to give them a chance at a real education and a safer life. But for you, and for countless others, this law changed nothing. The streets you walk, the chimneys you climb, they are the same as before. The masters, desperate to continue their trade and unwilling to invest in new, more expensive methods, simply ignored the law. It was easy to do. The act was poorly enforced. There were few inspectors, and even fewer people willing to report a master sweep for fear of being without a chimney cleaner. The penalties were so small as to be meaningless. A master might get a slap on the wrist, but he would go right back to his old ways, and you would go right back up the flue. For all the fuss and talk in Parliament, the law was, in practice, a piece of paper that had no bearing on your daily reality. The law's failure was a grim lesson in how difficult it is to change a system that is economically convenient for the powerful. The wealthy homeowners still needed their chimneys cleaned, and child labor was the cheapest way to get it done. The master sweeps, many of whom had started as climbing boys themselves, saw no reason to change. The system was too deeply entrenched. The very act of climbing, of sending a child into a narrow, dangerous space, was seen as a necessary evil, a grim tradition that had to be maintained. A scholarly debate still rages about why this first act was so spectacularly unsuccessful. Was it a lack of political will? Was it the public's indifference? Or was it the sheer logistical impossibility of enforcing a law that was so easy to break in a world without modern communications and a strong police presence? Historians still argue about the true reason, but for you, the outcome is all that matters. You were a subject of a law that was supposed to save you, but you were never truly seen by the people who wrote it. You are a ghost, moving through a world of grand ideas and noble intentions, none of which seem to apply to you. A quirky detail from this time is that the masters found clever ways to get around the law. If a new apprentice was under 10, they would simply lie about his age or claim he was their own child, and no one would question them. The children themselves, if they were asked, were often too scared or too indoctrinated to tell the truth. The masters had a complete hold over their boys, and the threat of a beating or a denial of food was far more real than the distant threat of an unenforceable law. The battle for your life, for the lives of all climbing boys, was just beginning. It would be a long, drawn-out fight, filled with more broken promises and failed attempts. The 1840 Act was a first whisper, a hint that some people, somewhere, cared. But it was not yet a shout. It was not a roar of outrage that could be heard on the streets or in the workshops of London. It was just a small, timid sound that you, a child of soot, barely registered over the constant roar of the city and the rasping cough in your chest. The path to freedom was not a straight one, and the first step was a stumble. The public's conscience, like a slow-moving glacier, finally begins its painful, grinding advance. The failure of the first act, while a bitter pill to swallow for those who suffered under it, did not kill the movement entirely. Instead, it showed the reformers that laws on paper were not enough. A new, more powerful force was needed: public opinion. And so, a new battlefront opened, not in the halls of Parliament, but in the drawing rooms and newspapers of Victorian society. Brave individuals, appalled by what they were seeing, began to speak out. They wrote articles, published pamphlets, and gave impassioned speeches, all aimed at shining a light on the hidden horrors of your profession. One of the most powerful tools in this awakening was the sheer force of story. Reports of real-life tragedies began to appear in print, shocking a public that had largely been content to look the other way. You might hear whispers about the famous case of George Brewster, a young sweep who got stuck in a flue in 1840. He was rescued, but the trauma and injuries from being trapped in the tight, suffocating space led to his death a few years later. His story, and others like it, provided a human face to the problem. It made the climbing boys not just a concept, but real, suffering children. The public could no longer pretend the problem didn't exist when a name, an age, and a specific tragedy were attached to it. The reformers, many of whom were philanthropists and members of the clergy, started to take more direct action. They would visit the master sweeps' workshops, often disguised or under the pretense of a job, to see the conditions firsthand. They interviewed the climbing boys, who, despite their fear, would sometimes whisper tales of brutality and hardship. These accounts were then published, raw and unfiltered, in newspapers and magazines. The Victorian public, so often concerned with propriety and morality, was faced with an uncomfortable truth. Their warm, clean homes were a direct result of a barbaric practice that was slowly killing children. The cognitive dissonance was immense, and it was beginning to crumble under the weight of these new revelations. A quirky detail that highlights the lengths some people went to is the story of a gentleman who became so convinced of the cruelty of the trade that he had a model chimney built in his garden. He then tried to send a young sweep up it, only to be horrified by the child's terror and physical distress. This direct, experiential approach was rare, but it showed how a few dedicated individuals were starting to turn abstract knowledge into tangible, undeniable reality. For you, this shift is subtle. You don't see the newspapers, but you notice the occasional kind look, the rare offer of a piece of bread, or the slightly less aggressive tone of a master sweep who has been warned by a homeowner. This movement was met with fierce opposition. The master sweeps fought back, arguing that the trade was essential and that mechanical brushes couldn't possibly do the job as well as a human climber. They claimed that the boys were well cared for, that they were like family, and that the reformers were just meddling troublemakers who didn't understand the realities of the business. This was, of course, a pack of lies, but it was a narrative that was convenient for many to believe. The fight was not just against a practice, but against a deep-seated economic and social system. Historians still argue whether the public's conscience was genuinely awakened by a new sense of morality, or if it was simply a matter of the issue becoming too difficult to ignore. Was it an evolution of ethics, or was it a form of societal shame, a desire to clean up a public image that was becoming increasingly tarnished by these gruesome stories? The truth is likely a blend of both. The movement to save the climbing boys was a slow, painful one, a testament to how difficult it is to change a system that benefits the majority, even when it's built on the suffering of a vulnerable few. For now, you are still a climbing boy. You still climb the same dark chimneys, endure the same hunger, and suffer the same cold. But there is a faint, distant hum of a different world, a world where your suffering is not just a part of the background noise, but a topic of serious national debate. The public's awakening is not a sudden dawn, but a gradual, barely perceptible lightening of the sky, a tiny crack in the suffocating darkness of your world. While the public conscience slowly stirred, a different kind of change was brewing, one that promised a more tangible end to your suffering: technology. For centuries, the method of cleaning chimneys had remained essentially unchanged. It was brute force and child labor, a grim testament to humanity's ingenuity for exploitation. But as the 19th century progressed, the spirit of invention was sweeping through Britain, driven by the Industrial Revolution. Minds turned to solving problems not with muscle, but with machines. And the chimney, that dark, winding passage, was finally seen as a problem that a machine, not a child, could conquer. The answer came in the form of the mechanical sweep. Imagine a long, flexible rod made of multiple screw-together sections, with a sturdy circular brush at the end. This was the innovation that threatened to make you, a climbing boy, obsolete. Instead of a small child wriggling through narrow flues, a man could now stand at the fireplace, assemble the rods piece by piece, and push the brush upwards, cleaning the chimney from below. It was safer, cleaner, and crucially, it didn't involve sending a human being into a suffocating, toxic space. The invention wasn't a sudden flash of genius. Various versions of mechanical brushes had been tinkered with since the late 18th century. One of the earliest pioneers was George Smart, who in 1803 patented a sweeping machine. Later, improvements were made by others, notably Joseph Glass in the 1820s, whose design became widely adopted. Glass's brush, with its spiraling bristles and strong, extendable rods, proved particularly effective in cleaning the intricate flues of London's homes. These inventions were not just theoretical, they were practical, working solutions that demonstrated a viable alternative to child labor. But the adoption of these new technologies was painstakingly slow. Why? Because you, the climbing boy, were simply cheaper. A master sweep could buy a boy for a few shillings, provide him with meager food and lodging, and essentially own his labor for years. A set of mechanical rods, however, was an upfront investment. It required capital, and it often required a master to learn new methods, to trust in a machine rather than the desperate agility of a small child. The economics of child exploitation, however abhorrent, were difficult to overcome. The master sweeps, predictably, resisted this change fiercely. They spread rumors that mechanical brushes couldn't clean as thoroughly as a boy, that they left dangerous pockets of soot, and that they would damage the flues. They argued that only a human could truly feel the contours of a chimney, navigate its twists and turns, and dislodge every last bit of compacted soot. These were, for the most part, lies designed to protect their livelihood and their barbaric methods. But these lies resonated with homeowners who preferred the familiar, cheaper method, and who were perhaps also skeptical of new, unproven technologies. A scholarly debate here often revolves around the precise moment when the tide truly began to turn for mechanical sweeps. Was it purely technological advancement, or was it the increasing public pressure and a growing moral repugnance for child labor that finally pushed the industry toward adopting these tools? Historians still argue whether the invention of the mechanical sweep was a direct response to humanitarian concerns, or simply a natural progression of industrial innovation that then enabled reform. It's a chicken and egg question of morality and mechanics. A quirky anecdote tells of early attempts by some masters to train their boys to use the mechanical brushes from inside the chimneys, believing it would be more efficient. The absurdity and danger of this practice, forcing a child to operate a mechanical device in a confined dark space, highlight the perverse lengths some would go to avoid true reform. Thankfully, this was not a widespread practice, but it serves as a grim reminder of the master's twisted logic. For you, the mechanical sweep is a distant hope. You hear talk of machine brushes or iron boys, but they remain concepts, not realities in your daily life. You continue to climb, your body still the most cost-effective tool available. But the very existence of these inventions, even if they are slow to be adopted, is a crack in the wall of your despair. It means that there is an alternative, a future where children are not forced into the dark, suffocating flues. It means that the system that binds you is not eternal, that eventually humanity might find a way to clean its chimneys without sacrificing its children. The wheels of progress turn slowly, agonizingly slowly for those who suffer, but they do turn. The quiet, technological revolution was important, but it was not the final blow to your profession. No, that would come from a sustained, relentless, and decades-long campaign led by one man, a man whose name, unlike yours, would be remembered by history. His name was Lord Shaftesbury, and he would become the unwavering champion of the climbing boys. He was not a man of the streets, but a man of Parliament, an aristocrat with a conscience that was deeply troubled by the suffering he saw around him. He took up your cause not out of economic interest, but out of a profound sense of moral duty. Lord Shaftesbury's battle began long before you were born. He was a key figure in the Factory Acts, which aimed to curb child labor in mines and mills. But the plight of the climbing boys held a special place in his heart. He saw the cruelty of the trade as a stain on the nation's moral character, a barbaric relic that had no place in a supposedly civilized Christian society. He was a master of political persuasion, a tireless advocate who used his position and influence to push for real change, not just symbolic gestures. He understood the failure of the 1840 Act. He knew that a law without enforcement was meaningless. So, his campaign was two-pronged. He not only worked to introduce stronger legislation, but also to rally public support and expose the masters who continued to break the law. He gave impassioned speeches in the House of Commons, detailing the gruesome injuries and deaths of climbing boys. He funded and promoted the new mechanical brushes, demonstrating their effectiveness and disproving the masters' claims that they were inferior. He became a one-man wrecking ball against a system that seemed unbreakable. His campaign was a slow, grinding effort. He faced opposition from all sides, from the masters who fought to preserve their livelihoods, from property owners who wanted to maintain the cheap labor, and even from some in Parliament who believed that the government should not interfere in private business. But he was relentless. He used every available tool, the press, public meetings, parliamentary debate, to keep your story in the public eye. He ensured that the memory of dead children like George Brewster, whose case you may have heard whispers of, was not forgotten. He made it impossible for the British public to look away. A quirky detail that highlights Shaftesbury's dedication is his personal involvement. He would often go to the master sweeps' homes, unannounced, to check on the boys' welfare. He would ask them about their working conditions and their daily lives, often to the great annoyance of the masters. This hands-on approach gave him first-hand information that he could then use in his speeches and reports, making his arguments all the more powerful and difficult to refute. He was not just a politician fighting a cause. He was a man on a personal crusade. A mainstream historical fact of this era is that Shaftesbury's efforts were a significant part of a broader wave of social reform in Victorian Britain. The same moral fervor that led to the abolition of slavery in the British Empire was now being turned inward, toward the injustices happening on British soil. The campaign for the climbing boys was a powerful symbol of this new era of social consciousness, a test of whether a nation that preached morality to the world could live up to its own standards at home. Historians still argue whether Shaftesbury's religious zeal was the primary driver of his reforms, or if his motives were more a product of the wider humanitarian movement of the time. Was his fight for the climbing boys a deeply personal mission to enact his Christian beliefs, or was he a canny politician who knew how to harness the growing public sentiment for social justice? The answer, as is often the case with history, is probably a combination of both. What is undeniable, however, is the profound impact he had on your life and the lives of the boys who would come after you. He was the one who refused to give up, who kept pushing even when the fight seemed lost. He was your voice when you had none. The culmination of decades of slow, grinding effort finally arrives. It doesn't happen with a sudden bang, but with the quiet, determined passing of an act in Parliament. On June 29, 1875, the Chimney Sweepers Act of 1875 is passed into law. This is the act that would truly change everything for you. It wasn't the first law, but it was the one that finally had teeth, the one that meant the suffering of the climbing boys was officially, unequivocally, and legally over. This act, thanks in large part to the relentless campaigning of Lord Shaftesbury, was different from all the failed attempts that came before it. Its key innovation was a new system of licensing. Every master sweep was now required to have a license to operate. This license could be revoked if they were caught employing climbing boys. The law also gave police the power to inspect premises and arrest master sweeps found with boys in their possession or caught sending them up chimneys. This new, robust enforcement mechanism was the crucial missing piece of the puzzle. It meant that for the first time, the law was not just a suggestion, it was a threat. For you, this law is not an immediate, magical liberation. It's a slow, unfolding reality. You might not hear about it on the day it passes. You might not even understand what it means when your master, grumbling and fearful, starts talking about new regulations. But you will feel the effects. He might start treating you a little less cruelly, a little more cautiously. He might begin to use a mechanical brush, reluctantly at first, but with growing frequency as the threat of a visit from the authorities becomes more real. The atmosphere in the workshop, which was once a place of absolute power for the master, now has a faint undercurrent of fear, a sense that he is no longer untouchable. The passing of this act was a landmark moment, not just for you, but for the entire concept of child protection in Great Britain. It was an acknowledgement that a child, regardless of their social standing, had a right to a childhood free from dangerous, exploitative labor. It was a victory for the reformers, a triumph of conscience over convenience. It proved that a dedicated, long-term campaign could, in fact, change society for the better. The legacy of Lord Shaftesbury and the other reformers is etched into this single act, a testament to their unwavering belief in human decency. A quirky detail that highlights the struggle of this transition is the fact that many masters would try to hide their boys from the police. If a knock came at the door, you might be told to hide in a cupboard, a cellar, or even, in a final grim irony, up a chimney. These were the last gasps of a dying, brutal trade, the last desperate acts of men who were unwilling to let go of their cheap living tools. The very act of hiding a child from the law was an admission of guilt, a final damning proof of the cruelty of the system. A mainstream historical fact is that the 1875 Act wasn't just a British phenomenon. Its success influenced child labor laws and social reform movements across the world. The image of the climbing boy became a symbol of industrial exploitation, a universal metaphor for a society that prioritized profit over humanity. The story of your suffering and of your eventual freedom became a cautionary tale and a rallying cry for activists in other nations. You were no longer just a small, insignificant figure in London. You were a global symbol of an injustice that had been defeated. Historians still argue about the true impact of the 1875 Act. While it was undoubtedly the final blow, some scholars contend that the practice was already on the decline due to the increasing efficiency of mechanical brushes and the growing public condemnation. Others argue that without the legal teeth of the act, the masters would have continued to exploit children for many more years. The debate is about which force, technology, public opinion, or law, was the ultimate factor in your salvation. For you, it's not a debate. The law is the thing that finally brings a change to your daily life. It is the end of an era, and for you, it is the beginning of a future you never dared to hope for. The law has been passed. The celebratory speeches in Parliament have long since faded into whispers. The Chimney Sweepers Act of 1875 is now a reality, and its consequences ripple down, finally reaching your small, soot-stained world. But for you, the freedom is not a sudden, glorious burst of sunshine. It's a slow, confusing, and often terrifying transition. The world you've known your entire life, a world of chimneys, beatings, and relentless hunger, is all you've ever understood. Now, that world is being dismantled, and you are left to navigate the wreckage. Your master, once a figure of absolute, unassailable power, is now a man looking over his shoulder. The fear is no longer yours alone. It's a shared burden, and his is the fear of being caught, of being fined, of losing his license and his livelihood. He might start to talk differently to you, less with a kick and more with a grudging command. He buys a mechanical sweep, a long, clumsy contraption of metal and bristles, and he forces you to learn how to use it. A grim irony that you are now teaching a machine to do the job that once defined your very existence. But the world outside the workshop is no easier. You are no longer just a climbing boy, but what are you? The skills you have, contorting your body into tight spaces, enduring pain, and surviving on a pittance, are not skills that are useful in a world that is now trying to be more humane. You are, in essence, a child without a future, trained for a job that no longer exists. You might be released from your master, either by his own fear or by the authorities. But where do you go? Your parents may be long gone or still too poor to take you back. You are a ghost, set free from a prison only to find that the world outside has no place for you. Many of the boys, newly freed, would find themselves on the streets, begging or resorting to petty crime to survive. The reformers, in their victory, had not fully considered the aftermath. They had freed the children from the chimneys, but had not created a system to support them afterward. This oversight led to a new kind of suffering, a transition from the physical torment of the flu to the social and economic torment of poverty. This is the grim reality of well-intentioned but incomplete reform. It's a harsh lesson that a law, no matter how noble, cannot erase a lifetime of damage and neglect. A quirky detail from this era is the establishment of early philanthropic institutions dedicated to helping these newly freed sweeps. Organizations like the Society for the Protection of Children from the Chimney Sweeping Trade tried to find new homes and apprenticeships for the boys. They offered them education, clean clothes, and a chance at a different life. But these efforts were a drop in the ocean. The demand for help was immense, and the resources were always scarce. The success stories, of which there were a few, were often overshadowed by the countless boys who slipped through the cracks. A mainstream historical fact is that this post-reform struggle was a common theme in Victorian social history. The abolition of one form of exploitation often revealed a deeper, more systemic problem. The Factory Acts, for example, freed children from the mills only to see many of them become street urchins or criminals. This revealed that the issue was not just about a specific kind of labor, but about the pervasive poverty and lack of opportunity that drove people to such desperate measures. The story of the climbing boys is a perfect example of this. Their liberation was a moral victory, but their subsequent struggle was a testament to the enduring challenges of poverty. Historians still argue whether the transition period was, for some boys, worse than their time in the chimneys. Was the certainty of a beating and a small amount of food better than the terrifying uncertainty of a life on the streets with no support? It's a dark and uncomfortable question with no easy answer. For you, the world is in flux. You are a part of a great historical change, a living example of a victory for human rights. But you are also just a hungry child, a small figure walking through the unforgiving streets of London, with a future that is completely uncertain and a past that is written in soot and pain. The chimneys are behind you, but what lies ahead is still a vast, terrifying unknown. The chimneys are silent now, or at least they are free of climbing boys. But the legacy of your suffering endures, a grim, ghostly presence in the heart of London. Your story, once a whispered secret among the poor, is now a permanent part of the city's history. It's a haunting memory, a moral lesson etched into the brickwork of the Victorian era. The great houses, once so proud and clean, are now silent monuments to a brutal system. Their flues a dark reminder of the children who were sent up to clean them. The memory of the climbing boys lives on in the language of the time. The phrase, sweep's knee, or sootwort, enters medical history as a cautionary tale of occupational disease. The very phrase, climbing boy, becomes a shorthand for the worst kind of Victorian child exploitation, a moral touchstone for a nation grappling with its own contradictions. Your suffering is no longer just a personal tragedy. It is a cultural artifact, a symbol of a past that a new, more humane society is desperately trying to escape. The stories of your lives, your deaths, and your eventual liberation become a part of the public imagination, a grim fairy tale told to remind children of their good fortune and adults of their moral responsibilities. But the legacy is also a silent one. As you walk through the city, you see the statues of great men, the names of wealthy philanthropists on the sides of hospitals and schools. You see the grand buildings that were cleaned by your hands, but you see no monument to the climbing boys. There are no plaques with your names, no statues in your likeness. You are a ghost, a presence that is felt but not seen. Your legacy is in the memory of the few who still remember, and in the enduring silence of the chimneys themselves. You are a part of a past that a nation has tried to whitewash, a painful truth that is easier to remember in the abstract than in the raw human detail. A mainstream historical fact that underscores this legacy is the inclusion of the climbing boy's story in the works of Victorian literature. Charles Kingsley's famous novel, The Water Babies, uses the story of a boy named Tom as its central narrative. The book, while a fantasy, was a powerful piece of social commentary, using the plight of the climbing boy to argue for better conditions and to expose the cruelty of the trade. This literary representation ensured that the climbing boy's story would not be forgotten, weaving it into the very fabric of Victorian culture. You became a character in a book, a symbol in a story, long after you were a boy climbing a chimney. A quirky detail that speaks to the endurance of this memory is the continued use of the chimney sweep as a symbol of good luck in some parts of Britain, a tradition that you might remember from the odd May Day celebration. Today, it's not a boy covered in soot, but a man in a top hat with a clean face who is seen as a harbinger of good fortune. This is a strange and ironic evolution, a tradition that has been sanitized and romanticized, its origins in the brutal exploitation of children completely forgotten. It's a testament to how a culture can take a dark history and turn it into a palatable myth. You, a symbol of misery, are now, in a strange twist of fate, a symbol of happiness for others. Historians still argue about the true nature of this legacy. Was the romanticized portrayal of the climbing boys in literature and art a genuine act of remembrance, or was it a way for Victorian society to process its guilt and distance itself from its own cruelty? Did the creation of a sanitized chimney sweep myth allow people to forget the real pain and suffering, or did it keep the memory of the original injustice alive? It's a debate about memory, guilt, and the complex ways in which a society chooses to remember its own past. For you, the ghost of a climbing boy, this is not a debate. The soot is still in your lungs, the pain is still in your joints, and the legacy is in the silent, empty flues that you once called your prison. The city has moved on, but your shadow remains, a permanent, indelible stain on its history. The echoes of the climbing boy's past fade into the background as we shift our gaze to the modern world. Your story, one of exploitation and suffering, has reached its conclusion. The brutal era of child sweeps is long gone, confined to the dusty pages of history books and the occasional period drama. What was once a life and death struggle in the dark, suffocating flues, is now a completely transformed profession, a respected trade that bears little resemblance to the one that claimed so many young lives. Today, if you were to encounter a chimney sweep, you would be struck by the sheer difference. The modern sweep is a professional, often wearing clean, specialized overalls. They arrive in a van filled with sophisticated equipment, not a sooty bag and a terrified child. Their tools are not small bodies, but long, flexible, power-driven rotary brushes, industrial-strength vacuums, and even cameras that can be snaked up the flue to inspect its condition. The job is no longer about brute force and claustrophobic agony. It's about precision, safety, and efficiency. The work still involves soot, of course, but it's contained. The vacuums ensure that dust is minimized, protecting both the sweep and the homeowner from the mess. The sweep often wears masks and protective gear, safeguarding their lungs and skin from the harmful particles that once caused so much illness and death. The risk of chimney sweeps cancer, once a grim inevitability, is now a distant historical footnote, thanks to improved safety standards and the absence of constant, prolonged exposure. The profession has evolved from a desperate, dangerous task to a skilled service, requiring training and expertise. The legal framework is entirely different too. Child labor, particularly in dangerous occupations, is strictly prohibited in most parts of the world. Chimney sweeps, like other tradespeople, operate under licenses and regulations that prioritize safety and fair labor practices. The very idea of sending a child up a chimney would be met with outrage and severe legal consequences, a testament to the decades of reform that began with the plight of climbing boys like you. The societal attitudes have shifted dramatically. What was once tolerated as a necessary evil is now universally condemned as a barbaric act. A quirky detail that demonstrates this transformation is the rise of chimney sweep guilds or associations. These are professional bodies that promote best practices, offer training, and ensure high standards in the industry. They are a far cry from the unorganized, often ruthless master sweeps of the past. Modern sweeps take pride in their work, often participating in community events and maintaining the historical connection to their trade, but now from a place of dignity and respect. A mainstream historical fact that highlights the significance of this change is the ongoing importance of fire safety. Even with modern heating systems, chimneys still exist in older homes and fireplaces remain popular. Regular cleaning is still essential to prevent chimney fires and carbon monoxide poisoning. The modern sweep, therefore, continues to play a vital role in public safety, but they do so with tools and techniques that reflect centuries of technological and social progress. Their work is a quiet, unsung hero of home safety, far removed from the desperate heroism of a climbing child. Historians still argue about whether the ultimate victory for the climbing boys was a triumph of human compassion or simply the inevitable march of technology, making their exploitation economically unviable. Was it the moral argument that finally swayed public opinion and legislation? Or was it the superior efficiency of mechanical brushes that rendered child labor obsolete? While the mechanical brushes provided a practical alternative, it was the sustained moral outrage, personified by figures like Lord Shaftesbury, that ultimately provided the legal and social impetus for change. The modern sweep stands on the shoulders of this complex history, a living embodiment of how society can, eventually, right its wrongs. The chimneys are still there, silent and strong, but the small, soot-covered bodies that once cleaned them are gone, replaced by innovation and a profound shift in human values. The sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of soft orange and fading purple. The city sounds outside begin to soften, replaced by the gentle hum of the night settling in. As the last lingering images of sooty streets and dark, narrow flues begin to recede from your mind, feel the comforting weight of your blanket, the softness of your pillow. The journey we've taken tonight through the grim realities of a forgotten past is now complete. The echoes of those painful lives, the lingering scent of coal and grime, they gently dissipate, fading into the quiet of your room. Remember, the world you inhabit now is one where such suffering is, thankfully, relegated to history, a testament to the slow, arduous progress of human kindness and innovation. Rest easy, knowing that the small, brave children of the past paved the way for a more compassionate present. Let your breath deepen, your muscles relax, and your mind drift away from the shadows we explored. The darkness we journeyed through was a historical one, and it remains firmly in the past. Tonight you are safe, warm, and free.